Welcome to the final episode of Series 14, everyone. We've got an excellent conversation for all of you with most of the folks from NeoScum. But before that, we have the normal announcements.
First up, we wanted to say thank you to everyone who is able to donate to the GoFundMe campaign for Jeff from System Mastery. It's going to help out a tremendous amount. Jeff is out of the hospital now and on the way to recovery, which is fantastic news. We are super happy for him. We like Jeff alive. Jeff, you hear that? We prefer you alive.
Yes, please stay alive, Jeff.
How we prefer all our friends, really.
It's true.
Most of the time.
Disclaimer.
You hear that, Jude?
All right. Next up, next week marks the 1-year anniversary that we released episode 0 into the world. Since that is the case, right, we've actually recorded a Q&A episode that we're really excited for you all to hear, which means that we are not accepting any more questions that we've been asking for the last few episodes because we already answered everybody, so...
Well, we will in about 2 minutes.
That's true.
Stop trying to predict the future.
Hey.
Finally, if you'd like to support us, there are a few great ways of doing so. You can always check out the One Shot Network Patreon at patreon.com/oneshotpodcast, which helps not only our show, but other shows on the network. You can also get access to bonus content of many of the shows on the network for hours of endless entertainment, except not endless because it's just hours. But it's a lot of hours. So, potentially endless as we are continuing to add things. So
just put it on a loop.
Yeah, there you go. It's endless depending on how you do it. If you don't want to or are unable to support us financially, you can also leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podchaser, or our Facebook page. Every review will help us out by pushing us up the rankings, which will get more listeners, which in turn will grow our community, which in turn makes us feel super great. And that's really what this is about. Reviews like this one from I Refuse from Canada on iTunes. It is titled Great Podcast. I joined in at the System Mastery crossover, and I quickly enjoyed the thought that went into how the show is structured. They don't just make characters, but they also discuss why the choices were made and how those characters fit into the mechanics that make the game unique. Lots of deep thought and introspection about the stories this game is built to tell, how each guest's character creation philosophy blends into that story. Also, lighthearted and fun. Love it.
Well, thank you. I love your review, I Refuse.
Thank you very much.
Well, with all of that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Welcome back to our discussion episode. Last time we created a group of characters for Shadowrun. This episode we will be discussing the character creation process. We are very excited to welcome back Eleni, Blair, and Mike of the NeoScum podcast. We do not have Casey with us this evening. He was unable to join us, but we have 3 amazing people as well. So, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves again for everyone at home and tell us a little bit about the characters that you made in the last episode?
Sure, I'll start. So I am Eleni. I'm all alone this episode. My comrade Casey is MIA. So I'm really going to do my best to represent Teacup Piggy. That's T-E-E, cup. And Piggy is spelled P-I-G-I. Just very, very important details here. Who is a pixie, little tiny little piglet who has just, is a little bit of it's kind of like Piglet from Winnie the Pooh. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Everybody's kind of like, ew, who is this piglet? But the piggy knows a lot about art and dancing and songs and smells. Is that all I'm supposed to say?
That sounds about right.
All right, cool.
Cool.
Awesome.
I'm Mike Migdall. With
Blair Britt,
we have created
Saint,
who is a human Christian theurgist mystic adept, which is basically the Shadowrun class that we had to make to recreate Jesus Christ, who was born in a vat.
Yeah.
I forgot that that's what you did.
How did you forget?
And
oh man, because it's been a couple
That's
weeks.
true.
Normally
That's
we
true.
do all of this together, and it's been a couple weeks, and I forgot about Jesus.
Forgot about Jesus.
I gotta say, this is probably one of my favorite characters I've ever made. But just real quick, some of the hits. Jesus, or Saint, as he's called, he spells his name Saint. All of those are, it's an acronym. So, and we don't know what it stands for. I don't think
We're gonna find out through sessions of play.
Exactly. He is also accompanied by the Holy Spirit, which is a spirit companion. And while Jesus himself is a pacifist, the Holy Spirit has an assault rifle ready to mow down the enemies of our Lord.
And also the Holy Spirit has a little Coco taxi, which presumably it's driving around Teacup and Saint.
Teacup is just probably sitting on Saint's shoulder, very small, but also smelly, and Saint does not want Teacup on their shoulder.
But you know what? Saint is really adept at animal handling because, they're a shepherd. And Teacup is a little pig.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
They get along. There's just a ton of negative qualities and positive qualities that we could really get into. Also, Saint is a boxer.
He knows how to haymaker.
Even though they're a pacifist, you have to
You gotta have one move in your pocket.
Yeah, just in case. In case all else fails,
And his
you can
is
punch somebody real hard.
His is the pacifist haymaker.
But yeah, we could get into all that, but I assume we'll get into that through convo.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Ryan, do you want to talk about the character that we made?
Yeah, we made an elf decker by the name of, I believe it was Aura.
I think so.
Yeah. And spoiler alert to everybody in the room in Chicago, Aura got her name from her mother, who used to be a hacker back in the day. So it was an inherited
I know
name.
this as a player.
Oh.
So, she is basically just a really, really, really good hacker, and also enjoys some frivolous arts and other things that really don't matter for hacking.
Spill the beans. What are the frivolous arts?
I don't remember.
I didn't say this last time, but my character on NeoScum is an elf adept, not a hacker. And she goes by Pox, but her real name is Oracle.
Ooh.
So it's kind of like Aura.
Also, your character enjoys frivolous
they're
arts
cousins.
as well.
Yeah, frivolous arts, absolutely.
Like pop music, right? That's
pop
one of
music
your skills.
and fences, which is actually just the art of fence, not
Fence making.
not
and
anything
decorating.
to do with stolen arms or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. Well, let's go ahead then and dive into our segment that we are calling D20 for Your Thoughts. Okay, in this segment, we want to talk to our guests about their thoughts on the character creation process and how it feels in this system compared to others. But first, we'd like to ask how each of you got into role-playing games in the first place.
Oh, I will start again. So, role-playing games in the first place, I got into because I'm in the improv community, and a lot of people play role-playing games. And I think my coach for one of my teams was invited all of us over to play Dungeons and Dragons, and I had never played it before. And he was just really good at explaining it and getting us into it. And the fact that you could do anything, I made a tiefling that continued to try to persuade people to pee on themselves and do all kinds of stuff that was not helpful at all. And my group kept saying, please attack and don't do this. And I was like, nah, I'm going to just keep doing this other stuff. It was very fun. Very, very fun. And yeah, that was my first, I guess, true experience with role-playing games.
That sounds like you picked up the general conceit of it right away then, which is not doing anything that the game says that you're supposed to do, but just doing whatever the heck you want. I'm pretty sure that's how these games work, right?
Totally, because I had like played a lot of board games and stuff, and the fact that this was like so open-ended, I was like, amazing. I don't have to be anything. I can be horrible. Here we go. Yeah.
Hey, you have given me too much power, and that was your mistake. Not mine.
I was horrible with love, but you know, I was trying to make the bad guys pee on themselves.
So I got my start. And Mike, I'm cutting in line because
No, go ahead.
because Mike is actually the one who probably got me into role playing games. So congrats, my man.
Wow, cool.
I'd always been like kind of like tangentially interested. I played a lot of like Magic when I was in middle school and high school, and so like Wizards of the Coast was always something that I was like pretty up on. I feel like I just never really had a group that played D&D or any other role playing game. But then Mike and I were on a comedy team at IO Theater, giving them a plug on this episode. And
You're
maybe
welcome,
last episode.
Sharna.
But Mike would put together like a bunch of like role playing games with sort of different groups. And I remember one time I went over and played D&D, and then another time him and Gannon, our game master on NeoScum, were essentially trying to like get together a Shadowrun group. And I came and played like probably like 3 times over the course of like 3 or 4 months, and then eventually we kind of like nailed it down to a few people we wanted to work with, and that's kind of how I got my start. I definitely have. It is weird because I have way more experience playing Shadowrun. I mean, I guess at this point this is all of us, but so much more experience playing Shadowrun, this horrendously complicated tabletop RPG, than any other tabletop game ever for me.
Yeah, I would agree probably.
Yeah, I got my start playing role-playing games like when I was a kid, just like playing with my action figures. I just would play them by myself. And
then Barbie
Yeah.
was role-playing games for me. I
I
played
never
a lot.
considered like Barbie as a role-playing game, but like
Yeah, okay, cool. So I did a lot.
I feel like that is just role playing with no actual game attached to it, though.
Yeah, the game was which Barbie stands last. They would kill each other.
I remember I used to make I had some mage knights which were cast-offs from my rich neighbors who collected like little miniature hero clicks type things, and they didn't like care for these like trash ones, so they gave them to me, and I would make them fight my Legos in these epic battles. But anyway, I was always trying to play like D&D, but I didn't like know the people who play D&D, or I would like try to hang out with them, but they were kind of like gatekeepers, and I couldn't play. And I feel like I've always had a chip on my shoulder about like wanting in to play games. And I remember in college, no one else like played any role-playing games. So I was like, I'm going to try to learn the rules, but like I have ADHD and it's like really hard for me to organize these things. And like, I remember scheduling was like always why things fell through, or we would get one game together and it wouldn't go well because like I wouldn't know the rules. And in the moment, like people would just be getting like drunk and high. And then like by the end of it, it was just like, what are we doing? It's like, this is just like a wild college party now, and we're not making a cool narrative. But finally in Chicago, I met like other improvisers, and we got our start like playing Fiasco, which is like a cool game, which you don't really have to plan for. And then later that turned into like with Gannon and other people who I knew from the improv scene, we turned it into like Shadowrun, and we turned it into our podcast, which we have now. And I'm like so grateful to have finally found, the people that I play role-playing games with. But for a long time, I was on the outside looking in like a little street urchin on Christmas Eve, looking at the happy families outside, just getting cold, Just wanted to be let in.
the Tiny Tim of RPGs, or
Yeah.
oh no. So when you guys are building characters for these games, what is your personal process? Do you have a way that you like to go about building a character in any system? Some people like to go from like picking a character from TV that they want to rebuild in a system, or they have like a certain idea of what they want to play. How do you guys go about doing that?
My process for most role-playing games is usually like I try to pick like one thing that I want the character to be really good at, and then really like dive hard into that and try to like maximize whatever like starting characteristics you can take to emphasize that one like particular thing. like for example, in NeoScum, Zenith is a hacker or a decker, and I just like dove into that, gave him a ton of stats like along those lines. And then usually there's some sort of framework within the game that like you're grabbing sort of like tangential skills that are related to other things. So I sort of like branch out over time into like related stuff. But I also think what's interesting about Shadowrun is that you can like, I've had to make a few in Shadowrun now just for like some of the other stuff we like do for our Patreon episodes in the NeoScum Gaiden. And a lot of those, I end up just like looking through like the positive and negative qualities, like picking one I think is funny or cool, and then just sort of building a character around the like role playing concept of what either that like negative quality or that positive quality.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit the same in that I will look through like the available skills of whatever thing it is that I'm playing and try to get inspired by that. But I also have like a pretty extensive theater background, and so I think the idea of like clowning comes into it for me for characters. And on a very basic level, like a clown has one or two very driving emotions or driving hungers. So, and it could literally be hunger, which is one of Pox's, my character in NeoScum, hunger and candy and like the desire to eat, or the desire for love or the desire for whatever. I'll try to like focus in on one of those strong driving emotion, like desires, and I let that sort of inform the character that I build.
I think that's really cool. I feel like sometimes I even just start with a name, and then I just say the name to myself enough that like then eventually a voice is formed, and then I'll like figure out a character from that voice and just go from there. But also I like pull a lot from like pop culture, and I'm like always reading and like watching, and I'll like take tropes that I'm like currently interacting with, and I'll just mix them together from different things. And then you're like, okay, I was reading this like 1850s British war fiction, and I was also reading this thing about like penguins. So now I have like a penguin who's like a British colonel, and then you have to give him like a negative trait so that it's funny. I don't know. It's like, yeah, and he smells so bad. And then those three things, usually like, okay, you have a character, just give him a name.
That's awesome.
Your name is Stinko. Colonel Stinko.
That's amazing. So specifically about Shadowrun, how do we think character creation in this game stacks up against other systems that we've played?
I think it's ludicrously complicated.
Yeah. Yes. It's insanely complicated. But I also think that it is really inspirational just because there's so much. You can sort of get lost in the sauce with it and be like, what the heck am I doing anymore? I don't know. But if you just pick up on one or two things and sort of go with it, you can find some really, really cool inspiration for your characters and for your story and all of that just by looking at like the stats that they give as options.
Yeah, I feel like I like the Shadowrun character creation mainly because now I'm familiar with it, so it like really is a lot easier to do. But I feel like for anybody picking up the book, you would get like excited to start building your character. You like put together the initial framework, and then all of a sudden you like have an initial idea. You've maybe even picked out like a few traits or characteristics that you like about this character, but now you have this like accounting job of trying to like make sure that every single one of your skill points is like allocated correctly. And I think like the issue that Shadowrun like struggles with a little bit is like giving you enough motivation to like complete the entire process, because I can't tell you how many times I've built like half a character on
and then stop
and then just stop. Yeah, because it's like, oh well, I figured out like all of this character's abilities, I figured out their attributes, I gave them a bunch of positive and negative qualities, I built their like cyberware, like implants set up, I bought all these like weapons and armor, but I still have to like figure out their contacts, I still have to give them knowledge skills. Like there's always just like so much homework to do.
I think the prolixity of like just dealing with everything that you can customize in Shadowrun is like a learning curve that I think turns a lot of people away. But it almost reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever like tried to play Dwarf Fortress, which is like a ASCII computer game that is so complicated looking, has a horrible like learning curve, but once you get rolling and like once you've spent like 70 hours trying to play this game, you're like, the most amazing story happened to me in this game. And then you're like weeping tears as your like dwarves die. And it's like, if you learn the language, like you can probably do whatever you want and make a really cool character, but there's probably other games to play if you're just trying to get up and, you know, play a game.
Yeah, I feel like Shadowrun's a game where if you have somebody like who knows the system really well, it's a breeze because they can kind of like handhold all of the newer players like through the process of creating characters. But like if you like, I can't imagine like, I mean, I guess like my head always goes to like a lot of people pick up tabletop RPGs when they're in like high school, and it's like I can't imagine a group of teenagers with no experience on Shadowrun just like picking up the guidebook and like figuring out how to play in any realistic way.
Oh yeah,
but I think as teenagers you have way more time to do that kind of crap. Whereas, like, I think about it and I'm like, you know how many gaming groups as an adult I have that, like, never make it past the first session? And so Shadowrun is the worst game for that because you would have spent more time making characters than actually playing the game. Whereas, like, in high school, I think you are much more inclined to stick with it because you have nothing else going on in your life. I mean, maybe that's just me, but
no, that's
like,
fair.
I think you have time to invest in that you don't as a grown-up with 2 children and a job and
absolutely yeah, I could see that for sure. And I would say that like, no, you put it perfectly. That's it.
I was surprised that this was more complicated than Heroes Unlimited character creation. The Palladium books character creation is notoriously there's a lot of options, let's put it that way, but it's relatively straightforward for the most part. So here it's more of a, well, what do you want to do? Well, if you want to be a hacker, it kind of looks like this, and now figure it out.
Yeah,
Right.
like they don't have like a whole like kit that they sell you on it.
Yeah.
You know? Like it's like at least in D&D you're gonna pick a cleric and then like it's gonna give you a bunch of stuff that are like you don't have to like figure out what your level 1 spells are, or
Well,
you know, like you're picking from like a pool of stuff.
I know in the main book they have some like suggestions for starter, right? Like some
Archetypes.
starter, archetypes, and they'll give you like, you can just play as this character. This is their things, and go ahead. And like, honestly, you're better off doing that initially, and then like leveling up that pre-made character, and then building your own from the beginning, I would say. Because when I first built my first character without using any software or anything to help, it was like I couldn't get past the first page for so long, and I kept then finally being like, cool, I can move on to the next step. And then it would ask me another question that then I had to go back to the first page, and I was like, what is going on? Like it kept changing all the numbers, and like it got so confusing that we recorded a couple of episodes, and then I was like, there's no way that I did this right. Like, I'm so weak. I don't know what's going on. There's no way. And it turns out I messed it all up, and I did a horrible job creating my character initially. So yeah, it's hard.
It also seems like this game relies heavily on lore knowledge. If you don't know like what the world's kind of all about, you're not going to really understand it too well through the process of character creation. It's basically like D&D. You go and create that cleric, you know you're a cleric, and it has a little blurb right in there saying what a cleric is and what their role is in the world. So you kind of have a little bit of understanding of how you can play that character without knowing much about the rest of the world. Whereas here, it's so open-ended. If you don't go with those archetypes, you will have no idea, like, what type of characters you can even create in this world unless you dive into the lore a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't think the character creation process teaches you anything about the game, really. Like, I remember when we did D&D, we talked about how you kind of start with this like higher level idea, and it sort of funnels you down as you go. And this is just like, it's so wide open that like at no point does it feel like the process is like getting smaller or easier at all. It's just, I don't know. It's like being thrown into the deep end of a pool. It just, it's a lot.
There's a lot.
And because there are so many expansions and everything like that, like it never ceases to be a lot. But once you embrace that, I think there is a there is like a beauty to the fact that you're like, yeah, I'm in the ocean. I can swim wherever I want to go.
Yeah, it definitely feels like one of those where you get used to it and you're able to really pull together some really unique and cool combinations, which is really nice.
In one of our like Gaiden episodes, I made a character that delves into like more magic stuff, and I'm in the main campaign. I just play like a gun guy, so you know I'm really good at shooting things and knowing how those rules work. But the character that I made, I initially like gave him all these magical powers, and then I was like, you know what? I'll go ahead and take some of these magical powers away because the rulebook is stressing me out, and I like don't want to have to learn how to summon like a giant pigeon goddess that's not in the rulebook. Now I'd much rather just like do it forced me to be less ambitious just because I was like, I don't have time to figure out the rules for that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like it took Casey probably he's still learning the rules.
That's honestly why I originally made Pox just an adept with no magical abilities and no technological abilities, because I was like, well, I don't know what I'm doing, but I guess we're recording, and so I'm going to know that I don't know any of this stuff, and I'm already confused enough that we're going to stick with being physically skilled, and like, I don't need magic and I don't need computers. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, in Shadowrun, there's this whole system where it's like you have the real world, and then you have the Matrix, which is like the digital plane, and then you have the astral plane, which is like the magic side of things. And it's like, yeah, I mean, like on NeoScum, we every once in a while will like dip our toe into the Matrix, but in no way to the extent that the rules like allow for like a full on like Matrix thing, to where like every individual action you're taking is like a series of rolls over and over again. And it's like the same, and we've never done that for magic. Like, the idea is that you're able to like move across the astral plane in the same way that you might through the Matrix, and like access other people or other things. And like, yeah, the rule book is just
it's funny because I even in like the Shadowrun video games, at least the first one, I've only played the first one, but the way that they handle Matrix stuff, I always thought was just so corny, where it's like, now you're playing the same video game, but it's just in like the most basic Tron environment. And in my mind, if we were to do this in a role-playing game, I'm like, the Matrix is a place of endless possibility. It's like, oh, you don't get to go to the setting you want in normal Shadowrun. Okay, in the Matrix, you can go anywhere that's like, you could go in an internet that's more futuristic than the internet that we have now. I feel like that's kind of daunting. And then there's like, so there's Matrix, and then there's just augmented reality on top of the astral plane as well. Yeah. I remember one time, Blair, you were like, does anyone else use augmented reality? And we were like, no. We just don't want to deal with that right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like in order to keep like a cohesive like narrative, it definitely, you like, Shadowrun like kind of limits your options in terms of like, you're kind of drinking from the fire hose a little bit. And the extent to which an entire group of people are all going to be down to like drink from the fire hose in the same way is like, I think that's really hard to find with a group of people like role playing.
Go find that online on Roll20 or something.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that you have to decide before you even start making characters, is what kind of game are you going to play? What is this going to look like? Because I think otherwise you're going to end up with some wildly different things because there are so many options. I mean, one of the nice things about having that many options is that there's never a moment where you go, I can't make this thing that I want. I don't think you ever get to a point where you have a character concept that you can't make into something, like that we have a teacup pig and Jesus. So clearly you can do pretty much anything here. But I think that sometimes not having those constraints can be really, really difficult to work out, because I get really overwhelmed when I have too many choices. And so Shadowrun is a game that like I sat down and I was like, nope, I'm just going to close the book and I'm going to walk away and somebody else can figure this out for me, because it's like, it's too much. It's too much all at once.
I am down to all learn how the Matrix works and do like an all-decker podcast sometime, or a campaign.
Oh, that'd be super fun.
Where we're all just like keyboard cowboys. Just
that sounds like a good name for a podcast.
And
Keyboard Cowboys. So you heard it here first. It's ours.
That'll just be our next Gaiden series.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love it. So how do you feel like the mechanics of creating a character reinforces how it feels to play this game? Or does it?
It does in a way, because playing the game is just as complicated as creating the character. You know, every turn in Shadowrun, every single turn, every move that you make is a series of rolls and calculations and stuff like that. So, you know, it kind of becomes one of those games where it's like, if you love doing that and you love rolling for every single thing, you roll for every single thing. Sometimes you got to just say, I shoot over there. Okay, yes. Instead of saying, I shoot over there. Okay, load your gun. Okay, cock your gun. Aim your gun. Shoot your gun. And you roll for every single one of those things. Some people like to do that. That's, you know, great. I'd say certain ones of those rolls we will bypass. But, yeah, it's intense, the mechanics of playing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like, something that D&D does really well is, like, when you are creating your character, the mechanics are, like, super evident. Like, you're picking a skill that literally is the name of whatever the thing is that you would try to do with it. Or at least, like, it all seems, like, pretty related. But the thing about Shadowrun that's really more complicated, I think, than it needs to be, is that a lot of times specific actions actually have a different pattern of rolling for it. So it's like, you know, if you want to, like run, or if you want to, like, jump up a building or something, like, that's a different, it's not just, like, rolling your skill plus your attribute. It's like, roll your skill plus your attribute, and the number of hits you get is the number of meters you make it up the wall. And, like, Shadowrun is, like, full of those types of things where it's like, it's not just like, it's not the binary of D&D where it's like, did you get over the threshold? Because if you did, it succeeds. And if you got under it, then it fails. And if you crit fail, it's really bad. And if you, you know, like, crit on the dice roll, it's really good. And, like, that's such an easy system. Whereas Shadowrun is oftentimes like 100,000 slices down any sort of potential outcome. And it's oftentimes like, yeah, I mean, you're, like, rolling to see the effects of, like, how many like minutes the drug you just took lasts. And I think, like, in that way, it kind of clouds what the mechanics of the game are from the creation perspective, because you're taking skills that are like gymnastics, but you don't actually know what the literal role would be to, like, do whatever thing you're thinking about doing with that skill.
I think maybe that appeals to just people who want the most customization as they can get. Like, my dad used to say that when he was in, like, grad school, his friends would, like, go play Civilization, the board game, and he would always be like, yeah, they would set up for about 12 hours, and then they would play for about 12 hours, and, like, it would just smell so bad in that room, and they'd just be like, they'd all be just, like, thrilled, like they were all on drugs, just like, yes, the numbers. They would roll for everything. It sounded exactly like Shadowrun to some extent, but with, like, slightly more numbers and math. It's like, if you like math, then...
Well, that's also, I think, in a way, making the gameplay a little bit more like gambling than storytelling. So you're adding in the dice roll and saying, I'm going to try to do this thing, and you're throwing in a gambling factor into it, which is exciting in a way. Like, I could see that being something that's like, yeah, do I get to do it? I don't know. But if really what drives you is the actual story and trying to tell a story, then sometimes some of the gambling has to be, like, removed a little bit.
I think maybe sometimes the gambling just informs the story, and then you're just like...
Oh, both. I think, yeah, both. But I think...
I see what you're saying. It's like the idea that, like, the more gambling you have in there, or, like, the more chaos or random number generator, whatever you want to call it, the more of that is in the game system, the less certain you can ever be of any decision you make, you know? Because you're like, oh, I'm going to, like, jump up this building. And if the game is going to throw a ton of barriers at you for that to even happen, then it just means that, like, that's just not going to happen in your story as often. And I think that's kind of, like, the challenge is, like, how much do you let that creep into your game to, like, make it feel realistic and, like, make those moments where you do succeed feel exciting? But then, like, where can you back off and, like, maybe let the narrative aspect of it just kind of shine through in a more in a less realistic, but more, like, you know, like, role-playing sense?
Well, and when you change the difference between, you know, from success or failure, where it's like a 50-50, you know, it's going to be this or it's going to be this. And then you change it to, is it 5 meters, 6 meters, 10 meters, whatever. You're expanding the number of options too. And so it makes it harder to feel connected to that story, I think, because it's harder to mentally make the jump to, okay, what's going to happen next? It's harder to figure out where things are going to go when you have like 12 different options versus a yes or a no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It almost is like, at what point do you just say, you know what, let's just play a video game together that is going to like do all of these calculations quickly so we can like move past that.
100%. Like there's an episode in NeoScum where we're like all trying to jump across this like building top, and we're like, I think it's probably, and you know, it got edited for the final episode, but I'm sure there is literally just straight up 20 minutes of us talking about distances and like how far people can jump. And that video game thing made me think like, yeah, in a video game, it's not like it's like, okay, this is going to be 30 meters. How long do you think, like, you know, all of that calculation is just done behind the scenes by a physics engine.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a guest that episode who had never played Shadowrun before, so like much respect to Rashawn who was there and
Yeah.
I've got a very
We
realistic
were sitting there
experience, I would
trying
say.
to debate. And then the other thing too is that like, you know, you have those stats like you were talking about, like gymnastics or whatever. And then you can have all those other things that you buy on top of it, wall running and stuff.
traits. Like there's a trait where you could be really bad at gymnastics, but have one trait where you're like, for some reason, when you were a kid, you really liked watching the Olympics. So you have a theoretical knowledge of like wall running. So it introduces like a new mechanic where you like flip a coin or you
So
like,
actually you have a plus something on that because magically, but you have to remember that you have that trait when you're doing it and that you're like, okay.
there's one trait that I have, my character Dak Rambo, who's like a wheelman. It's like my made up class. And I've never used it in NeoScum, but I can like push my vehicles past their limits, but I have to like roll a D6 and that's like how many minutes I can do it. And then after that, I have to keep rolling to determine how much stress damage my vehicle is taking, and never used it.
Horrendous. It sounds so complicated.
Sounds
But did I
scary.
spend most of my karma on this ability when I was making my character? Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I have this useless thing, which is like, I might end up using in the next recording. Who knows?
Yeah,
But,
who knows?
Every time I go into a recording, I'm like, I have to be like, I have this ability. I should remember to use it at least once for the sake of like the fact that I spent most of my starting resources on it.
Yeah.
Could be really cool.
Yeah.
Right.
So I want to ask, like, did you have to build Xanadu like an entirely separate character?
So Xanadu is I think a GMC Bulldog. We just used a template for like what their big van,
Like whatever
was.
the biggest vehicle you could find was?
And I think maybe we made some modifications just to make it like bigger and less wieldy.
Okay.
But you do.
Because like I know that it has like separate stress and everything like that too. So I didn't know if that was...
Yeah,
Yeah,
it has its
That
own,
seems like way more to keep track of than I would be.
Anytime in
prepared
any
for.
like in our guide and things, my character OK has a helicopter, and like you guys have motorcycles and stuff. All of those have their separate
we've
traits.
Dodge Xenons.
Yeah, and they've all got separate traits, and then like you've got your pigeons that all have separate traits.
Yeah,
And so
even Z's ocular drone has its own like set of stats. So that
Because why not?
Yeah,
Why
right.
not?
When
It's
he's, like-
important that your eyeball have its own separate stat.
when he's
Right.
like piloting it outside of his own head, like there has to be stats to like determine how well he can handle it, you know, like where he can take it, how he controls it, all this other
You
shit.
almost lost it one time.
Oh yeah, 100%.
like I said, I keep my character real simple. I'm like, give me no vehicles, give me no technology. I got a sword and I got a whip. Get out of here.
I like when I was making Z, I was like, I saw ocular drone and I was like, no way I'm not making a character with that.
Yeah.
Like I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I'm sure like, of course, as soon as I started playing Shadowrun and I like, looked around, I was like, oh yeah, like this is the classic, like every bad boy.
Every poop boy.
Every bad boy playing Shadowrun has like ocular drone as like their main skill, I feel like. Or one of them anyway.
Ganon lets us get away with a lot for the sake of, you know, moving the show along.
And for the sake of looking super cool, I would say.
Yeah, that's the thing is, I think these rules are in place to make to keep people honest. So it's like, oh, you want to make your character do something cool? Jump through all of these hoops. Oh, you did? Oh, you spent an edge? Great. They did the cool thing. I think we all have an understanding as improvisers who do like comedy that we know we have to lose sometimes. So we will put like complications in front of ourselves, and Ganon does not have to like go out of his way to keep us from getting too close to the sun, because like there's like been multiple episodes where we've shot ourselves in the foot intentionally because we were just playing our character's truth. And like, I feel like 3 improv classes or 3 like different levels of improv classes will equate to its own role-playing game system.
So do you find that frustrating then that this game has all of those rules in place that you guys don't necessarily need because you make things bad for yourselves? Because I know, like, I like games that have complications, and I like when bad things happen to my characters and things like that, but I've certainly played with people who don't, who are very averse to any kind of negative consequences, and so it's important that games have that built in there. But, like, I mean, if you're the kind of person that already puts those roadblocks up for yourself, do you find it frustrating that the game also does that?
I actually really like it. One thing I really like about the overcomplication is that it's impossible for you to know everything. So sometimes you like take an action and then you like look up the stat behind it or whatever. And then you're like, oh my God, why did I do that? Okay, so I guess my character just didn't know what was going on and did this very stupid thing. And now we all have to live with the reality of it.
Yeah.
We took red mescaline in one of the our guide-in episodes. Like several characters took red mescaline,
which is like a heavy psychedelic in the Shadowrun universe.
We didn't really look up all the stats. I was looking at a website that had like, I guess, video game stats from red mescaline, which are different than the actual Shadowrun stats. And we looked at it and it was like, okay, well, for the next 8 hours, we are losing our mind. And then for the next 8 hours after that, our stats are basically like 1 for willpower and charisma. So we're just going to be high as
It's going to be laying on the floor drooling for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was so fun. Like that moment of like not getting it and then just reading the thing like hours after we'd already said that we took the drugs. It was like, oh my God, we are so screwed. Like this is not going to work out for us. Like,
I would also say that going back to the idea of like having all of those rules, liking it or not liking it, for me, I like that it's there for exactly the reasons that Blair said. And I also like the fact that you can decide that you're like, I get these rules and we're going to ignore these rules. Like certain rules where you're like, I get it. I get why we would do that. But also, we're not going to do that because we're
also,
playing
I don't
our
want
own.
to.
Yeah, I don't want to. We're playing our own game. We're going to make this game work for us and be fun for us and play it the way that we think is fun. And that doesn't always mean following exactly what is written on the page.
Yeah, it's there for if you need it.
Yeah, like we're not going to roll for a recoil. We're not going to roll to like unsheath our weapons in combat. Like there's just like
Are you kidding me? I've been rolling for that this whole time.
But if Ganon was to say, okay, I want you to roll for this, I mean, fine.
We'd make a cheeky joke about it.
Yeah,
but
we'd be like, why are we suddenly rolling for that? Oh, rude. But then we'd be like, all right, whatever, I guess.
I think that's one of the beauties of role-playing games, though, because unlike video games where you have to play within the rules that they give you or it won't let you do anything, you can just decide that there are some rules that you like and some that don't, or some that work for the story that you're telling and some that just aren't important. And I think that it leaves a lot of room to play the game the way that you want to play it. And, for you guys, when you're doing a podcast, you don't want to do as many of those because you're cutting out a lot of those mechanics and stuff when you edit anyway. So they're not as important. But I think for some people, that simulationist aspect is a lot of what they want to do. They want the math and the crunchiness of it. And so I love that there's the opportunity to play both ways for people. If you really feel like having all of those rules, or if you're like me and that's just too much to memorize and you can't count to 4 sometimes, you can also just not do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better.
I really like that. And I think Shadowrun's one of those great games where it's like, it gives you such a complicated like network of like skills and all these other like mechanics and stuff. And you really can just be like, okay, well, we're going to take some of this stuff. The only thing I will say is I would love it if they themselves would admit to themselves that their system is ludicrously complicated and like offer even just like, hey, so here's like, A, B, and C. A is like super stripped down. The mechanics are really basic. Like this is mainly for people who are really hardcore role players. Then you have B for people who are a little crunchier. And then you have C for the people who are like crazy crunchy and want to like calculate the like decaying arc of their bullet as they shoot across the rooftop.
I don't know much about Shadowrun Anarchy, but from what I've heard, it sounds like it's a little more role-playing friendly. I know that people have kind of like suggested it to us, but we like having a GM.
There is a more pared down version of the Shadowrun role-playing game that I saw out there.
We'll never play it.
Right.
I don't know much about it either. I know that people have very strong opinions about it.
Yeah.
I have not spent enough time wading into it to have an opinion of my own. I just know that it exists and people have feelings about it.
Yeah.
That's as much as I've gathered at this point.
Awesome. So how does the process of character creation then set a player's expectations for playing the game? I know we covered this a little bit. I know I was a little disappointed that we didn't get to roll a bathtub full of dice for our characters.
Yeah, I think with this, you were going to say, immediately how intense the gameplay is about to be based on how intense it was to create the character. I don't know if I finished your sentence correctly, but
You nailed it.
I would also say and we talked about this pretty extensively in the last episode, but it sets you up to know not just how to mechanically play your character, but how to play it in a role-playing context as well. Because those like positive and negative qualities give you a ton of information. And it's like, sometimes I don't even have a great idea. And then it's like, oh, my character has this negative quality. So I'm just going to be I'm disrespectful to authority. So like, I know anytime I'm in a situation, I'm going to play that because that's like my character's truth. And that kind of gives you like a little like nugget of information to hold on to if you're like kind of unsure of how to interact with the new environment.
Yeah. I really like how the amount of options that you have for creating a character in this game really also sets you up for an unlimited amount of possibilities that this game offers while you're playing it.
Yeah. And it's also like, you have a skill that says, pilot watercraft, right? And your GM drops you in the middle of a city on the lake, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go find a boat because my guy knows how to drive a boat. So I'm going to like push this so that I get I get to use some of the skills available to my character.
And we don't really interact with too much of the Shadowrun lore, like the official lore, but like the lore that's like kind of hinted at in some of the options, like the character options. Also, just kind of to your point, there's just like endless possibilities for places that you can go, and like depending on what level of Shadowrunner you're making, like if you're making like a prime runner, you're being like flown around the globe or going to space or like anywhere that we could go in the future, while also there being like magic stuff. I feel like to me that would be motivating if I was trying to get through making a character. I would just see all those options and be like, wow, like what the heck is about to happen? Like, what are my friends going to make? What does the GM have in store? Like, there's apparently like vampires and weird neurotoxins and like moon bases. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, the one thing I remember is that like vampires, like one of their weaknesses is alcohol for some reason in Shadowrun. I don't remember why I remember that.
It's got distilled water.
I remember thinking that was weird. It seemed weird to me. We had to fight a vampire. I don't remember why.
Oh, that's cool.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, we've not dealt with any vampires, really.
Well, Zenith is a vampire. We just haven't revealed that just
It's always
yet.
been
Oh,
nighttime.
surprise. Yep, surprise.
Yeah, this is a special leak of the background character info on...
He's actually been drinking blood, but we just haven't talked about it at all.
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
put this behind a paywall.
Yeah.
I think that we've kind of covered this, or maybe there just are a lot of them. But what do you think is one of the biggest flaws of character creation in this system?
Oh.
Yeah, I would say it's just like it's like what I was saying earlier, like that's sort of like the bookkeeping like spreadsheet feel to the back half of character creation. I do really think it does a great job like pulling you into it and having like such a wide open like prairie of opportunities to like create a character around. But yeah, you get slogged down on all those, numbers and taking stuff away. And it's like at some point, if your game is ever forcing people to like spend ability points on stuff they don't care about, I feel like that is bad, I think like forcing people to make narrative or mechanical choices about how their character interacts with their environment is like that's just like the opposite of what a role-playing game should do. You should only be giving people choice to the extent that they want it.
I think some of the knowledge, I agree with that. I think just to zoom in on one thing in particular, the knowledge skills. So you have like your active skills, which are like your running, jumping, hacking stuff. But then you also have knowledge skills. And I feel like that might just be too open-ended, where it's like, I only have so many skill points, so I'm going to put 7 skill points in Bible studies and 5 in boxing history, and that's all I have for knowledge skills. And like,
you don't know anything about anything else.
Am I supposed to believe that this Jesus character only knows about boxing and Bibles? It's like, I know 2 things, boxing and Bibles. And I don't know how to dress myself or take a shower, but I feel like there should be, and certainly like your GM is going to be like forgiving to that.
Yeah, but it's interesting when everything else is so like down in the nitty gritty that the knowledge skills aren't that way. Like when you have to know the difference between like these various kinds of watercraft, or, you know, it's like I can only pilot large things or small things or like specific, you know, everything else is so specific. It's weird that the knowledge ones don't give you room to do that.
Oh, yeah. And the knowledge skills don't have a list of skills you're picking from either.
No, you just make it up.
You're like typing in your own like made up versions of it, and they don't tell you how they're used. So of course, like, I mean, and you know, even in Ganon's game that we're running, like, because the knowledge skills have so little like anchor to how the game is played, we rarely use anybody's knowledge skills.
Right.
It's like
true.
So rare that it comes up, and when it does, it is usually like in a way that is completely ham-fisted.
Right.
You know?
And it's like, oh, you know, yeah, I'm going to put you guys in this situation, but you know about that, right? And it's like, yeah, well, sometimes it comes up by accident, but for the most part, it's like you chose just arbitrarily. And so the chances of it ever coming into play are
so low.
So low, unless your GM is really crafting their story around what you know. But then that wouldn't really be true to life, really, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. It's an interesting area because they don't give you a whole lot of guidance, and it's like you have 12 points to spend on this area where like you couldn't even like I think that's a great one to zero in on, because it is 100% what I'm talking about when it comes to like just making random choices in the midst of like a character creation process.
I
picked some really broad ones as Dak Rambo, just because like I was trying to like cover as much ground as I could just to like make my character more useful. So like I have knowledge points in crime, and it's like a Shadowrunner. That's like everything you do.
I chose like elven wine.
Yeah,
things that are like, when will we ever talk about elven wine? Probably, maybe one time.
That's up to you.
A
little.
Yeah. You know what?
But when you do, you'll be ready.
Yep. Yeah, I'll be ready. But the thing is that I actually still won't be ready, because I'll be like, oh yes, elven wine. Huh? You mean from the Migdall grapes, which I just invented.
One time Ganon made fun of me because he was like, yeah, Blair has a Matrix Crimes bank or Matrix Crime banks on his knowledge skill sheet. Like, that's ever going to happen. And I was like, I just wrote that because I assume Zenith has robbed a bank before.
One of the worst things, though, because that's what we're talking about, right? Like the worst,
the flaws.
To me, when you increase, for example, if you spend later on karma on increasing like a base stat or whatever, how it affects a bunch of other things that you've added on to your character and different things that you would roll, then you would have to theoretically look back in the book to see every single other stat that you have and how the dice rolls are going to change now, because you changed one thing. Now, 6 other things are going to change. And that, to me, the fact that we use software has eliminated that, basically, and it just tells you and calculates it. But doing it on paper and having to do that yourself, I imagine, would be, to me, a nightmare. I am 100%. Absolutely not a math person and not a number person. So like, even the fact that we're saying the word numbers, I'm getting a little PTSD about it.
Did we already say things that we liked about the character creation?
We did, yeah.
That's not one of the questions here. I mean, I think that was the frustration that I had when I was building characters for this too, is just that like so many pieces tie together with so many other things that every time you were like, well, maybe I want to adjust this up or down, you'd basically have to start the whole process over again. And that is so frustrating, because then you get partway through. I think we've all built characters where you get partway through and you have like a different idea of how you want to do something. And it's like, well, either now I can't change it, just forget it, or I'm going to completely start over. And that was so frustrating to me, because there were a couple times where it was like, I just want to do this one thing a little bit differently. Nope, I can't. It's too late. I gotta just like push on through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even in the very beginning when you're choosing your priorities, the A, B, C, D, E, you know, if you finally get to the page where you're buying gear or whatever, and you're like, oh my God, I can never afford this because I chose the one that only gives me 1,000 new yen. And then you have to just redo everything so that you can change all your priorities and like readjust. And I did that like four or five times in my, you know, with certain characters where you're like, this character would be so much cooler if they had this thing.
And again, if you didn't have Hero Lab, like you would never do that.
No,
you know,
I'd be like, well,
it takes so long to get back to that point where you're like, all right, well, let me re-spend all of the skills and stuff that I already picked out.
One slightly other, like we haven't really mentioned it too much. And I do think it has its merits, but I think that the way that the character creation makes you pick your contacts is also a little restrictive to me, because you only have so many points that you can spend on like contacts. And I'm like, in real life, because I'm really good at shooting and gymnastics, that like shouldn't mean I don't know that many people. Because I spent points on that.
It's because you spent a lot of time training on shooting and gymnastics. You didn't have time to meet people.
We need socializing.
Well, I could have theoretically met a lot of people.
But you could also meet people that like gymnastics and shooting, maybe.
Yeah.
It is weird that you have to like pick. It's like, here are your friends. You know? Like
you have 2 friends.
Like, you have 4 points to spend on contacts. So you can either have 4 friends that don't like you very much, or you can have 1 friend that really likes you.
Yeah.
And I know that's
just like real life.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and you know how we're all restricted to only having 4 friends.
That's true. That's true. I have, you know, it's the MySpace top 8 thing, but it's just like real life.
I think
I love that idea that someone's like, yeah, I guess I didn't make his contact on his Shadowrun character sheet.
And I have one friend, and they're super well connected, but they're very disloyal to me. They could get me like a dragon's skull, but
That's very funny to me, because it's like none of the NeoScum crew are on each other's contact sheets, even though they would 100% be the most reliable people to them, right?
But we hadn't, well, in the beginning of the series, we hadn't all met.
That's true.
So.
But even then, we weren't like, you know.
But even now, would we add each other to the contact sheet?
I think player characters are, I feel
in
like.
a separate category.
Yeah. But the contact things I think are cool for GMs to be like, let me just see who these characters think they know, so that now I can be like, okay, this one character knows a ganger, so they theoretically hang out at a bar with this one gang. Maybe there's a rival gang that comes in. Like, there's lots of inspiration there. But like in NeoScum, we're on a road trip across the country, so the scope of our game doesn't really lend itself to having like 3 friends around a hub or something.
Mm-hmm.
Does it bother you to have to like establish those before you start playing? Because I feel like I didn't like that.
Yeah,
I think that I like the idea. So Night's Black Agents, for example, you have a pool of points to spend on contacts. And so you can say, I'm going to, at some point in the game, put 2 points into this contact. And then as you're playing, establish that person and how you know them and what you need them for. Whereas with Shadowrun, you have to do all of that up front. And I don't like that, because I feel like it's harder to weave those things into the game, and it puts much more pressure on the GM to do that.
Yeah, totally. So, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that like Dak Rambo specifically has a lot of contacts, right? Like
I'm just making them up.
Right. Dak Rambo knows a lot of people in our game, but you don't have every single one of those people that's ever been listed that you've known on the thing on your character sheet.
If I did that, it would not have let me make the character.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I would say that that's another one of those things where we sort of bypassed that rule a little bit.
Well, Dak did anyway.
Dak did.
None of us have had a chance to be like, hey, I know this guy from somewhere else.
That's
you can.
true.
All you have to do is just do it.
No, I mean, you've definitely shown us that we can do it.
I know no one. But my contacts have never like the actual contacts that I've put on my character sheet have never really come up. Wow. How interesting.
That means you can still change them.
Right, exactly.
I'm pretty sure that's what that means.
I can still just change them, but then other characters that my character has known have come up. So like, you know, really, maybe we're just not using this in the way that it's supposed to be used or something.
But it's so, I mean, what you were saying about like it putting a lot of pressure on the GM, like that's exactly the problem. It's like, yeah, so I'm going to make a character, and he knows like a bartender who is like a technomancer. He knows, this sniper who works for this gang or whatever. And then like already you're just throwing all of these like random dots for your GM to try to like string together and work into a cohesive thing, when your GM is probably just like trying to come up with a central narrative on their own to begin with.
I think it would probably, I don't know if I really haven't GM'd that much, but to me, I would like to know who your character knows, just so that I could make something that's satisfying to that character or to that player.
I think it serves a good purpose in terms of filling out the backstory, but for the mechanical use of contacts and we've never even done this, like there's supposed to be a way you check in with your contacts, that you like get information from them or like reference them on, a run you're doing. And it's just like, it's so hard to like work that naturally into the like mechanic play of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think it like forcing you to come up with other people is a great move, because even in D&D, it's like, yeah, if you just had to name 3 people that you knew before you started whatever adventure this was, that would be like a great like role-playing exercise,
Absolutely. I think it certainly gives the GM strings to pull, which I think is something that's really important. And I think gives the GM a lot of information about what kind of things are important to you as a player and to your character. I just think the way that Shadowrun does it is like, it asks for so much information ahead of time that you would normally kind of work out through play, I think.
There's also a lot of stuff that I think is just like filler on this character sheet. Like, I'm looking at mine, and this is from Hero Lab, so you like know it's all official, but it's telling me my acid protection, my cold protection, my falling protection, my electricity protection, my fire protection, my fatigue resistance. And
well, some of that is pretty useful, though.
Yeah,
but they're all the same.
Well, maybe the way you built it just magically had them all the same.
I think if we had like armor that protected against a specific thing. I mean, I think the reason this is so complicated is because Hero Lab just gives you every stat that it possibly knows.
Okay, well, I think this is also just the Shadowrun.
See, like mine.
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely
armor, acid, cold, falling, electricity, and fire are all 0. But fatigue, I have 8 resistance.
Wow.
So I don't know what we did when we were creating this character, but
you're not
we
wearing
made
armor?
it
That's
really
what it feels like.
weak, but very energetic.
Yeah.
Those are like all the stats for your vault suit in Fallout.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So how balanced then are the different types of characters that you can make in this game? Are some significantly better than others?
I've heard that characters who can like summon creatures might be broken.
I feel like magic in general seems like super powerful in Shadowrun.
Yeah, and also like if you're going to summon a bunch of creatures into a battle, then suddenly you've just extended the session by like 5 hours.
Oh yeah,
as
absolutely.
You like have to go do all of the roll, because I'm playing a character right now who has 6 pigeons who each have like specialties,
and each have their own initiative score. So every single combat.
Oh
yeah, and they all do stuff. And like one of them is like a technomancer pigeon, and they're like, so it's just like now I'm also playing with my own group of players who all live inside my head.
Yeah, it does.
You're just GMing your own pigeon game over in the
exactly.
corner while everybody else is doing their own thing.
It totally skews it in a way that's like, oh, you have all of these other advantages that like all the other characters do not have because you are playing 7 characters.
Yeah.
Even if some of them can only do very basic things, well, sometimes all you need to do is one basic thing and, that's enough.
Yeah, I will say I think a lot of that is mitigated by like the GM's preference. So for the most part, it's like I think even the multiple character thing is like, is the GM going to let you fight with that character in every single thing that you do, or are they enforcing whatever the rule is on like how often you can do that?
And also, I'm not trying to, like cheat by doing this.
No.
So,
but that's the thing is like I think like the GM and the players are sort of like the balancing of those things. And I think because Shadowrun's so complicated, there's not really like a really easy way to like game the system, because even if there was, there's probably a decent way for the GM to just shut it down or at least like lessen the power of it.
Yeah, totally.
And I just think there's so many release valves that like I'm sure someone online is like, here's the most broken like character model you could ever create in Shadowrun. But it's like, yeah, sure, but like, you know, what if a GM throws something at you where you like can't even move right out the gates? It's like that's a whole different type of situation. So yeah.
And at that point, if you spent that much time researching it, I feel like you just deserve that then. Like, you've given away years of your life looking all of those stats up. And so, like, I mean, as a GM, it would be my job then to just let you have at it. You deserve it at that point.
Yeah, good job.
I would even say if you're that person who like brought this like super min-maxed character to the table, the GM can just throw the entire rulebook at you because there is so much rulebook to go around.
I was thinking like the most broken character I can imagine in Shadowrun would be a super powerful AI. Like, I don't know if you've ever read like Neuromancer, but like the gods of this realm are just like AI that are so beyond like what a human can do. But then even then, if I try to play that character, I'd be limited by my own intelligence. It's like so much below that. And I would not understand like the zeros and ones behind what I was doing. So like, even if I made a super broken character, I would not be that character and could not faithfully roleplay it. I'd be like, yeah, the computer bleeps and bloops, and does that work, Gannon? Did I do it?
Did I break the Matrix?
I thought you were going to say the most powerful character would be an AI that had like 100 robots that it was controlling.
Whoa,
that
it could
character
summon robots.
Yeah, absolutely,
robots.
yeah. It could just turn any machine against whoever happens to be in the area.
Amazing.
That's beautiful, and you should do it.
Yeah.
You should build that character. How does building NPCs in a game differ from building PCs? Do you have to make NPCs the same way that you do
No.
regular characters?
Well,
please, God, no.
Well, if you use Hero Lab, I think there's a bunch of like presets, which I think Gannon's not here because he makes all of our NPCs essentially.
Yes.
But I think there's like a pretty easy way to make it through software. I think the book itself probably has a good bit of like presets for that as well. But also half the characters Gannon ends up playing that are like long time characters who show up in our podcast are like random people he walked up to us and was like, hey, just so you know, the bar's over there.
And we're like, oh, you're coming with us now.
Yeah,
and
we're
then
like,
You're our best friend.
yeah. And then Gannon ends up probably having to go home that night and like make a bunch of stats for that character.
There's been a couple times where I think Gannon has found out for NPCs that we've sort of like kidnapped literally or just metaphorically. And he's like, yep, now they have to go because I'm tired of being this guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that you don't need to build nearly as many stats for them because you can kind of, as a GM, probably pick which things that they're actually going to need to do.
Yeah.
You can probably say, like, okay, they're only going to need these 3 skills. And
occasionally within the software, Gannon has created some NPCs and then sent us, like if we were going to be playing them, he'll send us the file so that we can look at what their stats are and stuff, and still we make the decisions as the NPCs.
Yeah, we also play NPCs, which is pretty out there in terms of the role-playing game scene, I feel like.
Yeah, that's true. But,
but it's so much fun to do that.
Oh,
it's so much
100%.
fun to, like,
we love it. Yeah.
mess with stuff like that.
Yeah. But so, I mean, even on that thing, you can see that it's like less than half as much detail on that
Yeah, and it's
sheet.
like most of that isn't even... I mean, most of those are just combat skills, right?
Right.
Like 9 times out of 10, Gannon's not going to be like, yeah, just so you know, this is this random NPC's lockpicks skill or whatever.
Right.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's discuss our group's cohesion. How does the characters that we made gel together? Okay. Like in a typical session of Shadowrun, I know there's not really a typical session since you could explore so many different topics in this world. But like in general, how do you think we would fare in this world together?
So I'm thinking we're like lovable misfits. I'd imagine because of our 2 characters, or at least because of the teacup, I think we're more pink mohawk than black trench coat Shadowrun.
100%, yeah.
Even though
You
I
made
think,
Jesus. Yes, we are.
I do think that Jesus, I think
They made a powerful Jesus, though.
I think
your
Jesus
character
could play in a black trench coat world.
Oh,
for
yeah,
sure.
your character
The Coco
seems-
Taxi is pink mohawk.
yes, Coco and the gun.
and
No,
the fact
no,
that
no.
it is called Jesus. Or no, it's
Well,
called
he's-
Saint.
he's called Saint.
It's called Saint.
Honestly, if we had a super Christian neckbeard in our group, they would play this character.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like, I imagine what brings us together is probably Mr. Johnson. You know, it's just like the most, like the easiest quest hook of all is like, we have a job together. We don't know each other. We're forced to work. We're all loose cannons. And
I think that maybe the two of you got brought together by Mr. Johnson and you tripped over Teacup Piggy in an alleyway because Teacup Piggy is just a truly an awful character. I'm looking at it now and like this little piggy is...
What can this piggy do?
This piggy can just basically entertain. It's like a bard, but even probably worse than a bard.
So a face.
Not even a face. I mean, truly...
what I'm thinking too is that I'm imagining that in our game, Aura is like the in Wizard of Oz. What's the name of the girl?
Dorothy?
Dorothy?
So it's like one of these like coming of age stories, and Saint and the Teacup Pig are like
Jesus is the Scarecrow, or Saint is the Scarecrow. The Holy Spirit with the gun is the Tin Man, and then the Teacup Pig is the Lion.
yeah, and like Aura,
Yeah.
I imagine Aura probably having some like deep backstory, like emotional pull, while we're figuring out our stuff and probably protecting you and offering guidance in the way that those kind of like heroin games roll out.
Yeah, I would.
Teacup Piggy is just happy to be included.
Yeah, and is also cowardly.
Yeah, I'm just like, thank you so much for taking me along.
I can see Teacup
I'll also
Piggy
say-
being kind of like the distraction. Like, send in
yeah,
Teacup Piggy
absolutely.
first, and then everybody will be focused on them, and then we can do our stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I think with Saint and the Holy Spirit, you have a pretty clear, like, straight absurd relationship there, and then Teacup Piggy's like the comic relief, and then Aura is like the emotional heart. I also wanted to add on one tiny detail, which is if we're going for the full-on Wizard of Oz, like, you know, mapping. I'd say the Coco Taxi has like a little gold, like yellow brick road pattern up the center of it, and maybe even says the yellow brick road somewhere on it.
That's
but maybe
cool. I think that, you know, you're Miles Morales. Then we've got Peter Porker.
Oh yeah,
And
Yes.
we are the
it's like old Spider-Man.
Nick
is-
Cage one, but
The
yeah.
noir
Jesus.
Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, noir. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Noir Spider-Man, but Jesus.
yeah.
Yeah, nor Spider-Man, but Jesus. That's, you know, that common storytelling trope.
Of course.
Exactly.
I mean, I think, do we have anybody that can do any kind of like healing or anything?
You're talking to Jesus?
Of course.
Yeah, actually, Jesus can heal for sure.
That's awesome.
Okay,
We have
just making
pain
sure.
relief.
Yeah, let's look at these spells. Analyze truth, astral message, broadcast, clairaudience, clairvoyance. Man, none of these are healing.
We do have a pain relief.
Where?
It's one of our adept powers.
Oh, I forgot we're an adept magician. That's great.
And we're a bartender, so we can heal with listening and
No, I
serving
think
drinks.
we know a bunch of bartenders.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
We can't do that.
The only contacts that Saint has is a bunch of bartenders. Yeah.
Wow, so here's something kind of cool that I just realized about Teacup Piggy. Upon death, because of their metatype, they will vanish.
What?
So if Teacup Piggy got killed, they just disappear.
Wow.
And
We can't loot your body.
Nope.
Here's a fun
So-
fact about the Holy Spirit. He is immune to normal weapons.
What?
Cannot be hit by normal weapons.
Only by silver bullets, probably.
Yeah, and he's got that AK-97.
That's remarkable.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So we do have a little bit of healing.
I got nothing, but I do know a lot about dances, poems, smells, songs, and the War of 1812.
It's just poems, smells, and songs.
Those are my knowledge skills.
That's great.
And I've got a good performance, survival, and instruction.
I feel like that sounds like That sounds like the title of like somebody's autobiography. Dances, smells, songs, and poems.
I was thinking it sounds like lyrics of like the next verse of the DK rap from Donkey Kong. Dances, smells, songs,
and poems.
And don't worry, Teacup Piggy is always singing that song.
Yeah.
Just keep everyone entertained.
Oh, that is such a great... The Teacup Pig should write a book called Dances, Smells, Songs, and Poems.
Yes.
So good.
I also know about pistols, but I'm not strong enough to lift one. So
we'll work on that. Once you get some karma,
we'll get you a microfiber pistol.
Can you even hold that?
I mean,
It's
probably
as big
not.
as you, but don't worry. We've got some recoil suppression on this thing. It'll be fine.
Oh, yeah. And we'll hook it up to a smart gun so you don't have to actually pull the trigger to fire.
Whoa, that's cool.
Just like mount it to their shoulder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
cool. I'd play that video game.
I'd play the heck out of that.
Yes.
So let's talk about the system as a whole. What do you think about how it plays and how it lends to character growth as you play a story over time? So like, how does your character change as a person in the game?
Oh, I think that as you grow, because there are so many nuanced skills and things, and you keep unlocking even more options, you know, for example, if you get an exotic weapon, you need a special skill to buy that exotic weapon and then add skills on top of that. So like my character, when she bought a whip, first I had to build up enough stuff to be able to buy an exotic weapon. Blah, blah, blah. But you end up acquiring different skills that then you use in your story that somehow like, how did this happen? It gives you the inspiration to say like, what in the story made this moment happen for you? Was it something bad happened and, you know, you unlocked a new feeling or what?
I know that one of the ways Shadowrun, I guess, is encouraged to be played like by the book is that time passes, and like when you're making your character, you have to select a lifestyle, and that's like every month you're paying your lifestyle cost. And like you could theoretically be like, I spent this month upping my hacking skill, so I'm spending my karma on these attributes. We don't play it that way because like our whole podcast has been like 10 days or something.
Yeah, so we would never have had to pay rent.
Yeah, and like we're all just like homeless living in a van.
Right.
Yeah.
Stinky as heck.
Yeah.
But I know
Down
that
by
there's
the
a
river.
mechanic where if you want to buy traits, it's more expensive once you are out of character creation. It costs twice as much. So in a way, it feels like the game kind of discourages character growth or makes it you just have to be that much more cautious about what you're putting your points into because you don't get that many depending on maybe you have I feel like it's harder to grow once you're playing the game.
Yeah. I think like the progression system, I'm not a huge fan of, mainly because it is like so specific and it feels like you often don't know why or like what you're trying to spend stuff on. Like D&D has a pretty easy mechanic where it's like, oh, you're going to level up, and then when you level up, you have to make like a specific choice about what that means. And because you're in that particular character archetype, it's just kind of driving you further and further into like specializing. But oftentimes with Shadowrun, you've already maxed out whatever your like core set of abilities are. So like, you know, when you first start out, you're going to be like, oh, I want to be a decker. I'm going to do 6 logic, and then I'm going to do 6 computer skill. But it's like after that, if you want to get better at hacking, you don't really have like much wiggle room anymore. Like you can only get like wider at different things, or you can try to spend a ton of karma to like pick up a new trait or something.
Right.
I think that's also a sign of the world that we're playing in. Like we're living in this capitalist dystopia. Of course, it's hard to improve yourself when you're like living in this dystopian system that, you know, if you're a Shadowrunner, you're living outside the system. It's an uphill battle. You know, you're not in a Shonen Jump thing where like after 10 episodes, you can now unlock your hidden power and you're like going Super Saiyan, which I would love to play that system.
Yeah.
I would also say that like with karma, I find myself accumulating and not spending it because of the fact that even making one new addition to my character is like you want to look through everything almost. Like you want to make sure you choose carefully, because the next time you get to do that might not be for a while until you've, accrued however many more points.
Pox has so much karma. I'm blown away. I'm like, oh my God, I'd spend that yesterday.
I do. I have a lot of karma. But the thing is that I do like to incorporate it into how I'm playing and continuously use these things. You know what I mean? And the more things I add, the more I'm like, I don't even know what I can do anymore.
Well, and you'd have to change all those other things. You'd have to go back and make all those other adjustments too every time you move something around.
Mm-hmm. Well, that kind of ties into our final segment. So why don't we go right into our character advancement discussion and take it up a level?
In this segment, we cover how character advancement or leveling up works. So let's start with how a character levels up in Shadowrun and what sort of perks do you get when you do that?
So the basic idea behind Shadowrun is you are sort of similar to experience points. You are gathering karma. And when you first create a character, you get a certain amount of karma. And like Mike was saying a second ago, the cost for everything is generally higher in advancement than it was during character creation. And the basic idea is you're just accruing these points, and you can spend them on skills. You can also exchange them for money. Karma is like the universal currency of character advancement in general. And like Eleni was saying, sometimes you're trying to justify that with your GM, because obviously, if you're playing a mission and you're in the middle of the desert and then all of a sudden you exchange your karma for a new sniper rifle, it's okay, well, how did this happen? What was this? Did you find this buried in the ground? Because you don't want to just materialize new skills and items out of nowhere. But yeah.
So leveling up doesn't happen in the very literal sense of you have leveled up now. Your characters aren't really at level 1, level 2, level 3. They're sort of just, they are what they are. And then you can spend some points and increase certain stats, but not everything will change.
Yeah, and some stuff has maximums as well.
Right.
And there's some ways to get around maximums, but typically it's very expensive. And if you are trying to do something that is pushing a character to a limit, that's all you're going to be doing for the foreseeable future, as you just hoard karma to spend on that. Right now, I have very little karma in our current NeoScum game. And whenever I get enough karma to get a new little thing, I'm almost always putting it towards vehicle stuff, just to make sure that we're all alive, because we're in a vehicle for every mission almost. And it's I would love to give Dak the ability to do a roundhouse kick, but I don't want us to die. So
trying to protect the crew.
Do you find that frustrating that you can watch other people around you getting stuff, but you're sort of stuck hoarding it for a while when you...
Gannon is a very generous GM. So stats don't always come into the equation. Sometimes I can say I'm going to do something, and then Gannon's I don't know about that. And I'm going to be trust me, I can do it.
Yeah.
And then I'll have to spend an edge or something to do some complex action that I'm I believe that I can do this. Even if my character is out of shape or something.
And he'll usually say that was a great character choice, or a very creative choice. When you do something that Gannon finds inspired, that's how you get karma. That's how you can do things that are bending the rules a little bit. If you can say that Dak Rambo's face is now on the front of the truck and he is Dak Truckbo and he is the truck now, yeah, that's an inspired character choice. You are the truck.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we are improvisers and we're going to have a good time no matter what the rule book says.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting because advancement in our game is almost used as a way of just coming up with new stuff to bring to the table, or enhancing something that we're already doing a lot, which I feel is pretty standard across any role-playing game. But I think Shadowrun does feel a little limited in that, because it doesn't feel like there's a new, I can unlock something new that's sort of out in a different direction than my character is right now, but it doesn't always feel like I have a great way of pushing forward further into my character beyond diversifying what they're good at.
Right. Well, so there is one thing I want to say, which is a little bit of a spoiler because I don't think I've ever used it. So if you listen to NeoScum, then here you go. Here's a tidbit about Pox that I've never yet used. But I did buy something called Signature, which is it requires you to, once you kill someone, to leave a signature behind. So her thing is that she'll leave a lollipop behind or leave a piece of candy behind. But I don't think I've actually killed anybody in quite some time since I bought this thing.
Oh, okay.
So, but that signature, buying that, gave me more karma, because I added that, because it basically leaves a trail, like I'm a dum-dum and like a lollipop. So I leave behind like a little bit of a trail for people who are looking for evidence, but that gave me more karma points that I can eventually spend on something else to increase my stats at some point.
Because it's a negative trait.
Exactly. And you can still buy them. It's just that, they're not going to give you as much stuff in the future. And it didn't level up my character per se. In fact, it's sort of leveled down my character, but it's with the hope that eventually I'll be able to use it for something really beneficial and cool.
That's really neat. I like that. I like when you have the potential to mess stuff up. I don't know. I like making things hard on my characters.
I do like the concept of the karma system, and back to the video games that I jumped into this world in. Karma was along the same lines as you spent it when you could, or you saved up for something big. And it always was one of those things that felt really good to get karma, because you knew you were getting closer and closer to a goal. And it kind of feels like that would probably be kind of the same way playing the tabletop game.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's not always doesn't always feel good though when you have to hang on to it for forever to try and get something. Because sometimes you don't want to I don't know, especially if people around you are buying little things here and there and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And it's 10 sessions later and you're now I can finally buy this one thing to make myself a little bit better. That doesn't always feel super great.
Yeah. The bright side of that is that things are already so complicated that you often forget how much karma you have and you forget about doing those things. And I'm then oh, wow, look I got all these points and I totally forgot that I could even do this. Woohoo.
Yeah. I spent a ton of karma on a trait called lightning reflexes, which boosts your initiative. And every time I'm not first in the initiative order, I'm that was a freaking waste.
I'll say I also took a trait that isn't the lightning reflexes. It's I forget what the name of it is, but what it does is that your ability enhances your initiative roll. And Z has one that literally just puts him at the top.
Guts.
Oh.
Is it guts?
It's not guts.
It's not guts.
Because I have guts too.
Dak has guts, which he's also never used.
Right. And Pox
guts
also...
is a willpower thing.
Yeah, it's sort of who's going to do this first? Your character is a brave one. And it's well, if we both have it, then really who's going to do it first?
What guts does is that it just means that we have advantages when people try to intimidate us. Okay. And we, for the most part, are the ones doing the intimidating. So I don't think anyone has ever tried to intimidate us.
I'm not intimidated anyway.
That's awesome. So it sounds like it would be a bit beneficial to have character advancement in mind during character creation, since it's a little bit cheaper to get certain things during the creation process.
Yeah, I would say anything that you don't see as essential to your character, you can probably leave for advancement, because it'll take longer for you to get those skills. It's you kind of want to build a really good base and make sure that you have all the skills and abilities that you need to get your kind of day-to-day done. And then if you have something that you're oh, I think it'd be funny if this person, or funny or cool or whatever you're playing this game for, if you keep whatever that is in mind for your advancement stuff and focus your main skill points on what you're trying to do as your character's bread and butter.
Oh yeah, there's magic. You have to be magically awakened to do a lot of magic traits. Obviously, you have to be proficient with computers to do a lot of the computer stuff. I thought it would be funny one time to be I'm gonna give Dak the ability to who's a trucker, to make him really good at word processing or some specific decking skill just so he could help Z out in a specific, like, it would be funny if he had one random skill in this thing that he should know nothing about. But then the game was like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Didn't want it anyway.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Stay in your lane. And you can sometimes unlock some other things to be able to get out of your lane, but it would probably take a very long time to get any good at them. It
kind of reminds me of if you've ever played Final Fantasy X, where you're there's like a big grid system, but your character is starting somewhere in the grid. So if you want to make your magic character really good at fighting, you have to go much further, probably at the expense of your magic abilities.
Or like in Skyrim, where you have like the constellation chart, and you're like, okay, well, you can buy into this skill, but then there's all these little other things that come off this skill. And, you really want to invest in probably all those things or a bunch of those things in that one thing. And then it leaves a bunch of other stuff sort of neglected. But it still makes you strong. It's just strong in a sort of specific way.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking now, what you could do is if you made a character who had a lot of points to spend on like the skill groups, that's like one way to quickly become a jack of all trades, because you could probably get a lot of different skill groups, which are like you're just spending 1 point, but you're getting 3 skills boosted to a certain thing. So you could probably make a character could do anything that a Shadowrun character could do.
At like a really average medium.
Yeah, that would
level.
actually be kind of a cool character.
That would be interesting.
Just like the every person Shadowrunner. Like, yeah,
I can do anything. He's got just level stats.
Yeah. I can do anything okay.
Yeah. I'm just all right.
And I don't have that much essence for my magic, but
I can do it.
But I can
log online and do a spell.
Well, I think that about wraps up our discussion on all of this. Is there any other final thoughts that you guys want to add?
Catalyst, if you want us to help you rewrite your game, hit us up.
Yeah, let us know. We'll help rewrite Shadowrun to something more user-friendly.
We'll write the easy mode version of it. We'll just tell you, like, here, every skill just takes 1 6-sided die, and if you get a 6, it succeeds. If you get a 5, it succeeds.
Hey, don't spoil it all, Blair.
Yeah, okay.
Don't spoil all the rewrite.
Don't work for free here.
Yeah, numbers 1 through 4 TBD. We're still working on it.
Yeah. Maybe get some sensitivity readers, too, for your stuff.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about Shadowrun character creation. Do you want to remind everybody where they can find you and what things you are working on?
Yeah, I'm at Blair_Britt on Twitter. I'm part of NeoScum, as are my friends here. Yeah, check me out.
I'm on Twitter at It's Migdall Time. I stream with Eleni and friends. We stream under It's Mike Lenny Time on twitch.tv. Yeah.
I am on Twitter or Instagram, whatever you want, at Electric Eleni, NeoScum, and It's Mike Lenny Time on Twitch.
Very cool. Well, thank you again for sitting down to do this with us, and thank you to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
We'll be here next week. More Shadowrun.
What? Surprise.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts and guests, or even find some of our character sheets. Character Creation Cast can be found on Twitter at CreationCast. I'm one of your hosts, Amelia Antrim, and I can be found on Twitter at Ginger Reckoning. Our other host, Ryan Bolter, can be found on Twitter at Lord Neptune. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast it originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Amelia Antrim. Further information for the game system used and today's guests can also be found in the show notes. If you like the game systems discussed and wish to purchase them, links to the products can be found in the show notes. Also check our notes or the website for cool stuff to go with each character, like dice or mixtapes. Thanks for joining us. And remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. Now we gotta read some show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs. Character Creation Cast is hosted by the One Shot Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, visit oneshotpodcast.com, where you'll find other great shows like Design Doc.
Join hosts Hannah Schaefer and Evan Rowland as they redesign a role-playing game. Design Doc is an experiment in public participatory analog game design. It's fun, it's messy, and you're invited along for the ride. Yeah, that's close enough, I guess.
Yeah, cool.
I feel like mine's going to be super off because my stupid internet.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so Amelia is having
Sorry,
some
Ryan.
technical internet issues right now. She's about 3 seconds behind us.
You know what? We're going to work with that. Can you just, can you anticipate what we're going to say maybe and just kind of really lean into whatever feeling you're getting and just
You
like,
know what? I'll just laugh a bunch and we'll just cut it in
now
and it'll be fine.
now that we like.
That's good. That's great.
You can also just say, stop.
God, please stop.
Depending on how you're feeling.
We'll just pause after everything we say.
That would be a really nice gift for Casey, the editor, probably.
I mean, I can get rid of that blank space real easily, but
That's,
Dude, how does he do that? Figure that out.
Oh, one sec.
we have a kid intrusion.
Uh-oh.
We have a kid intrusion.
Kid intrusion.
That's my Shadowrunner.
let's get some suggestions for our characters from the child.
Yeah.
We find that the innocent mind of a child creates the most powerful Shadowrun
I
characters.
was just saying earlier to my friend who said that he's going to be trained to become an elementary school teacher or primary school. He was like, yesterday a child came up to me and they said, "Did you know I have a wife?" And he said, "Oh, really? What's her name?" And he said, "Laura." And he said, "Oh, well, how did you meet?" And he said, "In the playground." And then he said, "And where did you get married?" And then he's like, "Actually, we're not married." And then just sort of trailed off and wandered away.
Dude,
And I was like, kids are very good at comedy.
that's some next level, that's like the lawyer catching him in the lie, just setting up the scenario so that he can break him
I
down.
know I said he was roasted.
Wait a second. What was that kid's name?
I don't know.
I gave some kid a $300 wedding gift. Oh no!
Was he in London?
Bummer.
Yeah, he was in London at a playground. Tell me how to
Language.
walk down the street. Oh, sorry. Tell me how to walk down the street. I'm sorry about that. I got impassioned talking about Shadowrun.
Oh wait,
Oh, you cut
you
out.
cut out.
Oh, no.
You've never been more likely to murder someone than when you're pregnant. And so you think that it's a positive
Yes.
quality because it makes you stronger as a character. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
All right, yeah.
Same wavelength.
Absolutely.
Just
Wavelength. Even though you
anticipating
cut
it.
out, I filled in the blanks. And yeah.
Is Aura our mom's old handle when she was master hacker in the previous generation?
Oh, we lost sound.
We lost
But
sound.
yes, to answer your question, yes. Can you hear us?
That sounds.
hear us?
That would be pretty sweet.
We can't hear you.
Oh, what happened?
Hello?
Oh, did weird
got it?
stuff happen?
It cut out right as you were saying something which sounded initially so cool, and then we couldn't hear anything.
Is Aura the name that we go by our mom's hacker name from previous generation of hackers?
What the heck? You cut out.
Cut out and literally
Again.
Literally
at the
on the
exact.
same
Are you?
word.
Is this a bit? Are you just
You're not talking. He's
just-
not talking. He's just
so-
mouthing.
Hold on, guys. I think it would be cool if
It's a
Aura
prank.
was the name of the mom.
We suddenly hear your baby crying in the background. It's
That was uncanny.
you're mouthing words and then
Hey, we
Okay.
your wife walks in what are you doing?
One more try.
All right. So Aura was our mom's hacker name
We can hear you so far.
when she was a hacker in the previous generation of.
Did it again.
Did it do it again?
Maybe we save this for the discussion part.
Yeah,
You know?
we'll figure it out when the episode
This is information you're just not allowed to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll send you an email. And be like,
so this is like this is meant to be a mystery to our characters. So we don't know, and that's that's the way it has to be.
This is backstory that our characters are not privy to.
Oh my god, that is so funny.
We can't.
Yeah.
What's
That's
funny
amazing.
is that I guess
That's
on the
amazing.
master recording you will be able to hear both.
Yeah.
The whole
We'll
time.
just sound like we're laughing at I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay. Well, you'll have to wait until the episode airs to know what we were talking about.
And just
Yep.
get the end. Just drip with anticipation.